Alright, moving on to the Hermit Arcana, which is another social link that I completed recently. This is Arahabaki, the highest level of the Hermit Arcana. I haven't found him in my resources, but the form that he assumes, this is actually called Dogu. It's a kind of clay doll that's been found from ancient times in Japan. And not much is really known about them so far. It's assumed that they're probably a fertility deity, but all the dogu that, or most of the dogu that have been found have been broken, so it's obviously used in some sort of ritual. Dogu is also the name of an enemy in Okami, but as far as I'm concerned, I don't know exactly where I can find another name for Arahabaki. Alright, Kumbhanda, his description in my resources is incredibly vague. They usually say he's some sort of giant, but also a pot-bellied dwarf spirit. So this description doesn't exactly help me as far as piece together a better aspect of him, but when they provided that that the Kumbhandas serve Rudra, that is probably saying something, because Rudra, I think in Hindu myth, is often associated with the very violent and disastrous aspects of nature, which is like typhoons, violent storms, etc. So he's often commonly associated with wind and storms, but also of kind of the destruction that follows natural disasters such as that. So I assume these are pretty wicked beings, I think. Nebiros I couldn't find. There was something called Nibiru, which is a Babylonian god which is associated with the planet Jupiter. But in the Shin Megami Tensei Wiki, I was actually relocated to the source of the Goji demons for the 72 spirits of Solomon, and I think they mean by him as Naberius, which is a demon that teaches logic and is depicted, usually appears as riding on a black rooster. Also, I think the name is also a corruption of the Greek word Cerberus, which is the obviously the hellhound, three-headed hellhound of Greek myth. So I can't find anything that fits this. Alright, Kurama Tengu. I assume the word Kurama after looking at Genji, since Yoshitsune is found or his stronghold was called Mount Kurama. So I assume that since he's associated with Tengu, this is probably where they get the name from. Tengu as a whole, since this is the only Tengu in Persona 3, I might as well apply it to here. Tengu are regarded as the offspring of Susanoo, but whatever the case, they're said to be either malevolent or benevolent. They often trick people, often leading them astray in the mountains. But they're often very helpful. In the case of the story of Yoshitsune, they adopted him and taught him the art of swordsmanship, so that's pretty much where his association with the Tengu came from. They're often depicted with the head of crows or something like that. Taraka, they described her, in my resources they described her as being a Rakshasa, or a four-headed female ogre type being. And she was killed by Rama, so I assume this was associated with the attack on Kalon, which is the stronghold of one of the most powerful Rakshasas, Ravana, after Rama's wife was abducted by him. So there's not much I can really say about her, sadly, unless of course, again, if you find anything that will probably help me to go in better detail, I'd be glad to hear it, so just put it in the comments if need be. So, moving on to the next one a little slowly. Okay. Mothman. He's a recurring demon or a persona in the Shin Megami Tensei series, whichever you prefer. It's a cryptid, which is basically a kind of being that is described by people as existing, but there isn't that much evidence that confirms its existence. But still, there isn't anything that could really rule it out. And the Mothman, Ian, imagine when you fuse the Mothman crystal with a piece of equipment, specifically a talisman, you actually get the title of Prophecy, which is associated with the fact that the Mothman is often associated with doom, that its appearance is often followed by some sort of disaster in the future, as from what I've been hearing from different sources. Okay, next one. Lamia. This description's pretty accurate. She's the Queen of Libya, but I don't know how she became this sort of monster thing. I didn't know she was like that from the start. I assume she was punished by Zeus for something. But she's commonly associated with sort of vampire-like qualities, that she feeds on the blood of people. Also in the descriptions in my resources, they said she can actually remove her own eyes, which is pretty disturbing. But they said that also the name applies to, I think, her offspring, which are serpent-bodied women called Lamia, I think. So, not much to go by here. So I'm just gonna move on to the next one. Hermit has quite a bit of personas here. So, alright, Naga. Naga is basically the name associated with serpent-like water deities, or they're often associated with water or storms, but most often fertility. It is said that they actually do mate with humans. They're adopted in Hinduism and also Buddhism, and they're eternal enemies of the Garudas, primarily because they, one of the queens, I think, of the Nagas actually ransomed the moon, or Amrita, for the Garuda's mother, so that basically kind of started the blood feud. In this title, it's said that Ananta, which is the Aeon Arcana, and Vasuki of the Hanged Arcana are associated as a form of Naga. Okay, Shikome, this is the lowest level of the Hermit Arcana. I found Shikome alone. Basically, she's often called a storm demon, but the full name Yomotsu-Shikome is associated as, I think, a generic name for a female demon that lives in Yomi, with the underworld. And I think she's also called the Eight Ugly Females, which is basically one of the legions of demons that Izanami sent after Izanagi when he visited her in hell, saw her as sort of decayed, and he just fled. And so she got angry and sent demons after her. So he sealed the gates of hell and, I think, purified himself, forming new deities. So I'm going to wrap this up here.